into something that I think is on a lot of people's minds right now. And it's something that's been kind of swirling around in my own head, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's this whole idea of, like, what happens to work as we know it when full remote work becomes even more common and AI starts to take on a much bigger role?
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like we're really at this kind of tipping point.
It is.
Where things could go in a few different directions.
Definitely.
So to try and get a grasp on all this, we've been digging into this really fascinating text collie.
Okay.
And for anyone who hasn't encountered this term before, it's basically just a collection of like different writings, research, opinions.
Yeah, a bunch of different perspectives all kind of thrown together.
Exactly. And what's so interesting about the text collie we've been looking at is that it presents these two very distinct, almost completely opposite viewpoints
interesting.
on what the future of work might actually look like.
Okay, so like two paths diverging.
Exactly, like a fork in the road. And on one side, we have what we're calling the advocate.
The advocate, okay.
And this perspective is all about embracing full remote work, powered by all these new AI tools. They see it as this huge opportunity to kind of break free from these old, outdated ways of working.
Right, so like less tied to a physical office.
Exactly. Think no more commutes, flexible schedules, and AI there to help you manage your workload.
Sounds pretty good to me, actually.
Right. It's definitely appealing on the surface.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you have what we're calling the skeptic.
Okay.
And they're sounding the alarm bells, basically.
Oh, so they're not so enthusiastic.
Not so much. Their concern is that this whole shift toward full remote work and AI could actually end up making our work lives feel more isolated.
I see.
Less fulfilling, maybe even damaging to our sense of community.
Interesting.
So what's really cool about this text collie is that it doesn't just present these opinions.
Okay.
It actually lays out a bunch of evidence to back them up.
So like some hard data to consider.
Exactly. We're talking stats from various studies, real examples of how companies are already changing.
Oh, wow.
Even predictions about how this could impact things like our cities, our environment.
So like the big picture stuff.
Absolutely. And that's really what we're here to unpack today, to sort of sift through all this information.
Right.
Pull out what seems most important, and ultimately help you, the listener, make sense of these two very different visions of the future of work.
Makes sense.
So let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it.
And I think a good place to start is with like the core drivers of this whole shift, which obviously are the rise of remote work and AI.
Right. Two big trends that seem to be kind of converging.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with the advocate's perspective?
Okay.
They paint this picture where in the future, the traditional office, like the one we're all used to, becomes a relic of the past.
Like a museum piece.
Pretty much. And that daily commute,
The dreaded commute.
it just disappears completely.
Oh.
And AI comes in to take over all those like little tasks that can really eke into your day.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
scheduling meetings across different time zones, maybe even like drafting the first version of a report or presentation.
Yeah, that would be pretty handy.
Right. But the thing is, the advocate isn't just like making this stuff up. They actually cite some pretty compelling data.
Okay, so what kind of data are we talking about?
Well, for starters, they point to research suggesting that by April of next year, so just a few months from now, over 40% of companies worldwide are expected to have some kind of official remote work policy in place.
Wow, 40%? That's a pretty significant chunk.
It is, and it really shows how this isn't just like a fringe trend anymore.
Definitely not.
It's becoming pretty mainstream.
So what about the AI side of things?
Oh, right, yeah.
What kind of evidence do they have for that?
Well, they talk a lot about technologies that are already here, like ChatGPT, for example.
Oh, yeah, ChatGPT. Everyone's talking about that.
I know, right?
It's everywhere.
And it's a perfect example of how AI can automate a lot of tasks, especially ones that involve text, which, let's face it, is a huge part of most people's jobs.
True.
So the advocate is basically saying, look, these tools are already out there, and they're only going to get more powerful and more integrated into how we work.
So it's not just some far-off futuristic thing.
Exactly. It's happening now.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest arguments the advocate makes is that this rise in remote work, combined with AI, is going to lead to huge productivity gains.
Oh, interesting. So they're saying we'll actually get more done.
That's the idea. They even cite a Stanford study from just last year, 2023,
Okay.
that found a 13% increase in productivity for remote workers compared to those in a traditional office.
13%? That's not insignificant.
No, it's not. And their argument is that without all the distractions of an office
Mm-hmm.
and the time lost to commuting, people can focus better, get more done in less time.
Yeah, I can see how that could be true.
Right. And to really bring this to life, they highlight a company called GitLab.
GitLab, okay, I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're pretty well known in the tech world. And they're a really interesting example because they have a huge global workforce, like around 1,500 employees spread across 60 different countries.
Wow, 60 countries.
I know, it's amazing. And the thing is, they operate entirely remotely. They don't have a central office at all.
That's pretty radical.
It is. And they seem to be thriving,
Yeah.
which kind of makes you wonder if maybe the traditional office model
Mm.
isn't as essential as we always thought it was.
Yeah, it definitely challenges some assumptions.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, what does the skeptic have to say about all this?
Oh, well, they're not quite as convinced about this whole productivity thing.
Really? So they're pushing back on that?
Yeah, they're saying, okay, maybe there's an initial bump when people first start working remotely,
Okay.
but is that really sustainable in the long run?
So they're questioning whether it's a long-term solution.
Exactly. And they actually bring up a study from this year, 2024,
Okay.
published in the Journal of Economic Behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And this study found something pretty different. Apparently, after about 6 months of remote work, employee engagement actually went down.
It went down.
Yeah, by about 15%.
Hmm.
And even worse, burnout rates increased by 20% compared to people who were still working in a traditional office.
Wow, so it's almost like the initial honeymoon phase wears off.
Yeah, it's like the novelty fades and then the downsides start to become more apparent. And I think this is where things get really interesting because it's not just about getting tasks done, it's also about how we feel about our work.
Right, the psychological impact.
Exactly. And the skeptic is basically saying, look, we need to pay attention to this. We can't just assume that remote work is going to make everyone happier and more productive.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, work is such a big part of our lives.
Totally.
It's not just about ticking off boxes on a to-do list.
So the skeptic is definitely raising some valid points.
Definitely.
And their concerns about AI are even more pronounced.
Oh, how so?
Well, they see it as potentially becoming this, like, surveillance tool.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they even use the term babysitter,
Babysitter.
which is kind of a creaky way of putting it.
It is a bit.
But it really gets at this idea that AI could be used to constantly track employees, monitor what they're doing, how much time they're spending on tasks.
Oh, I see. So like a big brother kind of situation.
Exactly, and that could create this really uncomfortable feeling of being micromanaged, even if you're physically alone.
Yeah, not a great feeling.
So right off the bat, we see these two very different perspectives on the future of work. The advocate is all about the potential benefits, the efficiency, the flexibility, while the skeptic is much more cautious, worried about the potential for burnout, decreased engagement, and this kind of loss of the human element in the workplace.
Okay, so two pretty contrasting views.
Absolutely. But it gets even more interesting when we start to consider the broader societal impacts.
Okay, so how does this play out on a larger scale?
Well, the advocate, true to their name, argues that this whole shift towards remote work and AI is actually a really positive thing for society as a whole.
Okay, so they see it as progress.
Exactly. They even compare it to the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, wow, that's a pretty big comparison.
It is, but they're basically saying that just like the Industrial Revolution transformed how we live and work, this current shift is going to lead to similar kind of fundamental changes.
So they see it as a natural evolution.
Exactly, and they point to a bunch of areas where they think this will have a positive impact.
Like what, for instance?
Well, take education, for example.
Okay.
They see huge potential for AI-powered tutors
Oh, yeah.
and virtual classrooms.
That makes sense.
They even mentioned a UNESCO report from this year, 2024,
Okay.
that showed improvements in STEM scores for students who are learning remotely with AI support.
So they're saying it could actually lead to better educational outcomes.
That's the idea. And they also talk a lot about the need for workers to retrain to adapt to this new landscape.
Yeah, that seems inevitable.
Right, like developing digital skills, becoming really good at virtual collaboration.
So those skills that are becoming increasingly important.
Exactly.
But what about our cities?
Oh, well, the advocate has a pretty radical vision for that, too.
Oh.
They think that with fewer people needing to commute to offices every day, there's going to be less demand for all this, like, sprawling office space in city centers.
Okay, so less office sprawl?
Right. And that could free up a lot of land,
Ah,
which could be used for things like parks.
more green spaces.
Yeah, or affordable housing.
Interesting.
They even envision cleaner air because there'd be fewer cars on the road. And they see AI optimizing everything, like traffic flow and energy consumption.
So like a smarter, more efficient city.
Exactly. And they actually cite a McKinsey estimate that suggests this could lead to trillions of dollars in savings globally by 2030.
Trillions. That's a lot of money.
I know, right? But of course, the skeptic has a very different take on all this.
Okay, so what are their concerns?
Well, their biggest worry is that this shift towards remote work could actually lead to the hollowing out of urban centers.
So, like, a decline in those city centers that are so vibrant right now.
Exactly. They point to what happened in San Francisco last year
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
when a bunch of businesses downtown,
Yeah.
especially retail stores, had to shut down because there just weren't enough people around.
Wow, that's pretty stark.
It is, and it really highlights the fact that cities are these complex ecosystems, and the daily presence of workers supports a whole network of other businesses and activities.
Right, so it's not just about the offices themselves.
And the skeptic also worries about the impact on smaller local businesses,
Mm.
like your neighborhood coffee shop, the little restaurants that rely on that lunchtime rush from office workers.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem.
And another point they make, which I think is really important, is that this whole idea of retraining might not be so easy for everyone.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
They use the example of like a 50-year-old truck driver,
Okay.
and they're asking, how easy is it for someone like that to suddenly switch careers and learn all these new digital skills?
Yeah, it's not a simple thing.
It's not, and they're basically highlighting the human cost of all this change.
Right, because these are real people's lives we're talking about.
Exactly. It's not just about abstract economic trends. And to really drive this point home, the skeptic brings up what happened in Japan last year.
Oh, what happened there?
Well, apparently they saw a big increase in remote work.
Okay.
And initially there was a boost in productivity, just like the advocate predicted.
Yeah, okay.
But then things took a darker turn.
Oh, no.
They started seeing a rise in mental health issues
Oh, wow.
and even an increase in suicide rates, especially in areas with a lot of remote workers.
That's really concerning.
It is, and it's a pretty stark reminder that while remote work might have some benefits, it can also come with some serious risks.
Definitely.
And this kind of leads into the whole debate about whether AI can actually help us stay connected in this new world of remote work,
Oh, that's a good point.
or if it's just going to make us feel more isolated. The advocate, as you might expect, is pretty optimistic about this.
So they think AI can help bridge that gap.
Yeah, they talk about things like sentiment analysis in work chat apps.
Okay.
So, like,
Hmm.
AI can detect if someone's feeling down or stressed.
Yeah. Interesting.
They also talk about virtual reality workspaces, where you can kind of hang out with your colleagues virtually.
Like those metaverses everyone's talking about.
Exactly. And they even mention mental health apps that are powered by AI.
Oh, wow.
So they see AI as this like digital glue that can help remote teams function and stay connected.
It's almost like a virtual support system.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But I'm guessing the skeptic isn't so convinced.
You guessed it.
So what's their take?
Well, they tend to view things like sentiment analysis as more like surveillance.
Oh, I
It's
see.
like another way for companies to monitor employees. And they see those VR workspaces as being kind of gimmicky and not really a substitute for genuine human interaction.
Yeah, I can see their point.
And to really illustrate this, they bring up what happened in Japan with those AI-driven mental health check-ins.
Oh, right, the ones you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, apparently they didn't actually prevent that rise in mental health issues.
So they weren't as effective as people hoped?
It seems like the skeptic just doesn't believe that technology alone can solve the potential problems of isolation and loneliness that come with remote work.
That makes sense. I mean, technology can be a great tool,
Totally.
but it can't replace everything.
So even though the skeptic has some pretty strong reservations, the advocate still maintains that this shift towards remote work and AI is inevitable.
So they see it as like a done deal.
Pretty much. They even cite a report from Global Workplace Analytics,
Yeah.
which predicts that something like 60% of white-collar jobs could be fully remote by 2030.
60%, that's a huge number.
It is, but of course the skeptic has a counter statistic.
Of course they do.
This one comes from an Oxford economic study, also from last year, and they predict a 25% increase in social disconnection as a result of all this.
So a more pessimistic outlook.
Definitely. And this kind of brings us to the economic and environmental impacts, which both sides have some pretty strong opinions about.
Okay, so what does the advocate have to say about that?
Well, on the economic front, they're very positive. They talk about the creation of a truly global talent pool.
So like breaking down geographical barriers.
Exactly. The idea is that with remote work, People in developing countries could compete for jobs anywhere in the world.
And AI could help bridge any gaps in skills or language.
Right. It could really level the playing field.
That's a pretty powerful idea.
It is. And then on the environmental side,
Hmm.
the advocate claims that we could see a 20% drop in carbon emissions.
Wow, 20%, that's significant.
Yeah, and this would be due to the decrease in commuting and business travel.
Okay, so less cars on the road, fewer planes in the sky.
They even cite an MIT climate model from this year that supports this claim.
Okay, so they have some data to back it up.
They do.
But I'm guessing the skeptic has a different perspective.
They always do. They argue that while commuting might go down,
Okay.
the rise in remote work could lead to other environmental problems.
Like what?
Well, they worry about increased suburban sprawl
Oh, I see.
as people move further out from cities because they don't need to be close to an office.
So more development, more habitat destruction.
And they also point to the potential for a big increase in online shopping and shipping.
Oh, right, because if you're not going out as much.
You're ordering more stuff online.
Exactly, which means more trucks on the road, more packaging.
And they cite a report from Carbon Tracker, which suggests that all these new sources of emissions could actually offset the gains from reduced commuting.
So not the win-win that the advocate is hoping for.
Not necessarily. And the skeptic also raises a really big concern about AI in terms of jobs.
Okay, so beyond remote work specifically.
Yeah, their worry is that as AI gets more sophisticated, it's not just going to assist workers.
Yeah.
It's actually going to start replacing them.
So we're talking about potential job losses.
Exactly, and that could have huge economic consequences.
Definitely, it's a concern a lot of people share.
So once again, we see these two very different viewpoints. The advocate is optimistic, seeing the potential for global economic empowerment and a greener future, while the skeptic is much more cautious, worried about potential job losses and a shifting of environmental burdens rather than a true reduction.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how it's implemented and the potential consequences.
Exactly, and I think this brings us to one of the most fundamental questions, which is, what about the human element in all of this?
Right, because at the end of the day, it's about people.
Totally. And the advocate basically sees the traditional structures of work, like offices, commutes, hierarchies, as becoming obsolete.
Oh, so they think they're on their way out.
Yeah, they see them as outdated and inefficient.
Okay.
And they believe that this shift towards remote work and AI is this natural and exciting evolution.
So they're embracing the change.
Totally. They're looking ahead. But the skeptic, they have a completely different take.
So what do they think?
Well, they're worried that this whole shift is actually going to erode the fabric of our society.
Oh, wow.
They're concerned about the loss of human connection, the weakening of communities. They argue that cities have always been these vital centers of innovation and social interaction. And they're afraid that widespread remote work could really damage that.
I see. So they're worried about the social implications.
Exactly. And their conclusion is this really powerful call to action.
What do they say?
They urge us to fight for reality.
Fight for reality.
To
right?
resist the pull of this, like, seemingly convenient but potentially isolating digital future. They're basically saying, don't give in to the algorithms. Don't let technology dictate how we live and connect with each other.
That's a pretty strong message.
It is, and it really makes you think.
It does.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these two very different visions of the future of work, I think the key takeaway is that there's no easy answer here. The advocate presents a really compelling case for a more efficient, equitable, and environmentally friendly future, powered by remote work and AI. But the skeptic's warnings about social fragmentation, mental health risks, and the loss of human connection are equally valid.
Right. Both sides have strong arguments.
And what's so fascinating is that both sides are drawing on real data, research findings, examples from the world around us.
So it's not just about opinions.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole issue so complex and so important to think about.
Definitely.
So as you've been listening to all this, I'm curious, which vision resonates more with you? What do you think the future of work holds? And what are the implications for your own life, your community, your career?
It's a question worth pondering, and I think ultimately it comes down to striking a balance between embracing the potential of technology and protecting what's fundamentally human. It's a conversation that's only going to get more important as we move forward. Absolutely.
And that's something for all of us to keep in mind. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.